So we might get started, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to prospective students and family members. And I think there are some alum that are in the crowd as well. So delighted to have you here tonight at this information session, Focus on Commerce at the University of Melbourne. To introduce myself, I'm Professor Paul Jensen. I'm a Professor of Economics here at the University of Melbourne, and I'm also the Deputy Dean of the Faculty of Business and Economics. So one of the major things that I do in my role is to look after the Bachelor of Commerce. So I'm the administrator of that particular program. So I'm here tonight to give you some information about the program that we offer here, the subjects that we offer, the majors that we offer, and the sorts of pathways into career opportunities that you can experience if you do come to the University of Melbourne and take a Bachelor of Commerce. So I should say too that it was quite a long time ago that I was in your position making decisions about what to do at university, and it's a really exciting phase, and I think, hopefully by the end of the session tonight you'll have a much better feel and a better sense of just how exciting the range of opportunities are here at the University of Melbourne. I mean, it's very different to when I first went to university some 20 years ago, 25 years ago, and it really is an amazing suite of student experiences that we have for you here. So just to give you an idea of what we're going to cover tonight, there will be plenty of time for you to ask questions at the end, and there are certainly program experts here who'll be able to answer specific questions that I'm not able to. But we're going to run through some details tonight about, I'll give you an outline about what you can study. So what do the subjects and the majors look like that you can study here? How does the degree work? What is a Bachelor of Commerce degree relative to other options out there in terms of, Bachelor of Economics or Bachelor of Business? I'm going to introduce a couple of our current students who are going to give you a sense of their experience here at the university. So hopefully they'll touch on some of those issues about transitioning from school into university and the scary process that entails, but also talk to you about some of the amazing opportunities that are here, both at the university but also internationally, because we now have a range of different opportunities where we will send our students off on exchange overseas or participating in case competitions, which would mean for a very select group of high achieving students, we send you off to remote parts of the world to compete against other students from other universities on real world case competitions. We also are going to have a sample lecture tonight, so we've got one of our star lecturers from the Department of Finance, Sean Pinder, who's sitting down the front here, and he's going to give you a real-world sample of what he teaches in his corporate finance classes. And then finally I'll come back and just give you some information on the range of scholarships that we offer here in the faculty, and they can be scholarships that are merit-based, so to reward outstanding students who are thinking of coming here to the University of Melbourne, but also in terms of some of the financial support and assistance we can provide to students who do come from socio-economic disadvantage. So we'll give you plenty of information about that, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions, or I hope there'll be lots of questions from the floor about the specifics of those programs. And of course, finally, we'll get to that point where we give you where the rubber hits the road and tell you exactly what it is you need in order to have a good chance of getting into the program. And year on year, there are certain factors that vary a little bit about the requirements to get in, but certainly in terms of the ATAR requirements, we can give you a pretty hard and fast idea about the standard that we've seen in the last few years, and our expectation is that won't change in the coming year. And as I said, just finally, there will be an opportunity for you to ask me some direct questions. They could be points of clarification or specific issues about things that I raise, but there are a handful of people here from our academic support office who will be able to give you detailed information about requirements with regard to, for example, the maths you need to be taking at school in order to get into the BCom. So first of all, just a little bit of an ad for the quality of the program that we offer here. It really is, an outstanding degree when you look at the personnel that teach into the programs, the quality of the academics, the quality of the research scholarship that they do, but also the investments that we're making in terms of the teaching and learning that we provide. One of the things that has changed dramatically since I was at university all those years ago is the way technology is now changing the way we teach in the classrooms, and we're working extremely hard to embrace those technological changes that are occurring. So I won't go through all of those rankings, but suffice to say that on just about any of the metrics on any of the subject area disciplines that we offer within the Bachelor of Commerce, we're right up there in terms of the world rankings, and that's a credit to the university for hiring such amazing people, but also for the culture and environment that we've created here in terms of providing both the resources and the environment for people to do outstanding scholarship. Just finally, there, I'll also mention that we have all of the accreditations required. If you take a Bachelor of Commerce and major in accounting and you're worried about whether you're going to be accredited at the end of all of that, yes, you will. We work very hard to make sure that we get all of the professional accreditations that we need in order to give you the best jobs you possibly can when you finish. And also to note that, it's an incredibly diverse student body and academic body these days. Once upon a time we were very Australian focused in terms of the nationalities that we observe both in the teaching staff and in the students, but that's no longer the case. It really is extremely diverse, and the latest numbers we have suggest that there are people from 54 different nationalities, 54 different countries that are currently active in years 1 to 4 of the Bachelor of Commerce. If you're taking an honours year, there is a 4th year. So I think that's a really important thing to remind ourselves. You are learning with a cohort of amazing people from all around the world, and the relationships that you form now will hold you in great stead in the future in terms of having a global network of friends and colleagues. So why choose commerce? And this is a really important point to try and understand, I think, and I'm sure that many of you are grappling with that. It really is more than a degree. We like to think of it in terms of one overarching degree with endless career options that are embedded in it. And the reason I say that is because it gives you these foundational skills in business and commerce. So we require you to come in and take a number of core elemental subjects in order to give you that grounding in commerce. So you need to do some economics, you need to do some finance, you need to do some accounting. But we also give you this opportunity to choose and specialise in the majors that you really have a passion for and that you think you want to work in when you finish. So there's the foundational stuff, and then there's all this flexibility, this choice that you can make. And so we give you the best of both of those worlds. We have extremely well-rounded graduates, so one of the key selling points about coming to and doing any of the undergraduate degrees at the University of Melbourne is that we have requirements for you to take what we refer to as breadth subjects. So not only, if you want to specialise in corporate finance or investment banking, not only do you have to do these foundational subjects that I just mentioned before, but we require you to go off and take subjects from completely different areas, not even within the Faculty of Business and Economics, but from outside the university. So if you have a passion for Chinese language or African drumming or glee singing or whatever it is, anything that's on campus and there's a subject around it, you can take. And some of those could be, passions of yours that currently exist, and some of them could be areas that you'd like to explore in the future. But the idea is that we want to give you this really solid foundation in stuff that we think is going to help you get a fantastic job, but also to help you become an extremely well-rounded individual. Because you can't predict, I can tell you from my own experience, you cannot predict how your interest in music is going to help you in future life and commerce. And those things might happen 20 years in the future in your life, but I can guarantee you they will. And so we actually believe it's important to make those breadth subjects compulsory. So depending on what majors you take, you'll be required to take at least 4 and up to 6 of these breadth subjects. In terms of these unique student experience opportunities I was talking about before, you know, we're moving very much into a world now of work integrated learning. So we're doing a lot more to try and give you not just the specialist technical skills that you need in order to go and work in the banking sector, but also to recognise that once you get into the workforce, the things that you might need are softer skills as well. How to communicate, how to work in teams, how to make presentations to executives and to board members. Those sorts of skills are really important, and we're doing a lot of, we've built into our curriculum a lot of expectations and opportunities to develop those sorts of softer skills as well. And as I mentioned, we also now will send you off overseas to go and do exchange programs. We'll send you off overseas as part of one of the business case competition programs. And, you know, I know from my own experience, I, for the first time this year, took a team of 4 of our current undergraduates. So 2 are from first year and 2 were fourth year economics honours students. And, you know, they work hard over the summer to practice on these case comps. And then I took them over to Montreal in April to compete against 10 of the world's best universities. And they won. So we'll see later on that they had an amazing experience. And not only was it life-changing for them, I think they actually had the experience of winning the entire competition. So it's something that they can put on their CV and be extremely proud of in the future. So I've talked a lot about, you know, the big picture, exciting stuff. Let's move into some of the more detailed information, particularly about the structure of the course. So as I said, there are some compulsory subjects that every student must take in order to get a Bachelor of Commerce. And they're really subjects that the academics here have determined are fundamental to understanding the nature of commerce. And they include economics and finance and accounting, and there's a management subject in there as well, and quantitative methods. Then there's a range of core subjects where, you know, electives, if you like, where you can choose once you've decided, and we don't necessarily think you have to make this decision right up front, but maybe at the end of year 1 you think, you know what, I thought I was going to be really interested in finance, but I've now decided that's not for me. I want to go down the economics pathway. So I want to specialise in economics. So let's look at the range of subjects that are on offer for someone who wanted to major in economics. And that's where you can start taking these electives, these core, what we refer to there as core subjects. So you've got between 11 and 13 of subjects that you need to take there. And finally, there's the breadth subjects that I've already mentioned. So overall, it's 24 subjects that you must satisfactorily complete. And normally, that would be over a 3-year period. So that would be 8 subjects per year. So blocks in semesters, normally we'd see students take 4 subjects per semester in a standard course load. So there's some details on the specific majors that we offer. There's an accounting major, an actuarial studies major, an economics major, a finance, marketing, management, and a business major. And there's just some examples there on the sorts of issues and subjects that you would be familiar with if you took a major in any of those particular areas. So breadth, as I've mentioned, they really are complementary to these foundational studies in commerce. To be a bit more specific about what you can do, you can, if you wanted to, not just do subjects in languages or mathematics or computer science. You can take a concurrent diploma. So you could do a Bachelor of Commerce with a diploma in computer science or information systems or something like that. Also in your breadth subjects, excuse me, I'm struggling with a little bit of a cold at the moment. You could, if you wanted to say you're interested in going on and doing a law degree, a postgraduate law degree here at the university, which we refer to as the Juris Doctor, the JD. So if you wanted to do that and you were pretty sure that was the pathway you wanted to follow, you could choose your breadth subjects which would give you the pathway into that. So for example, you might take, business law or intellectual property law or something like that, which would help take you into the pathway into graduate studies in law, or in property and construction, or in engineering, and there's lots of other pathways that you might want to follow. You could be exploring passions outside of your commerce disciplines. I mentioned the music one before. That was something that I was deeply passionate about when I was a teenager and studied a lot. I would love to have had the opportunity to go off and take some music courses when I was at university, but it wasn't available to me, and now it is available to you. Finally, just to mention that again and reinforce this idea just how important it is to have this multifaceted understanding of the world. And that really underpins everything we're doing here at the university in terms of what they refer to as the Melbourne model, this idea that you take an undergraduate degree which gives you all of these experiences both in subject matter areas but also in areas external, so that you have this very different way of looking at the world. Right, so on to these enrichment opportunities. I've mentioned a few of these, so I'll skip over some of the global study opportunities, but that's only part of what we do now in terms of providing student enrichment. And we have a team dedicated in the faculty to student enrichment and employability, and they do a lot of really interesting stuff. So some of the things they do, there's career mentoring programs, so you can be teed up with someone in industry or in business, in government, who might want to come in and mentor you, and that can be a very useful way of not just understanding a little bit about the way business works, but also what skills they're looking for, and they can shepherd you into your career as you leave university. We have Future Leaders series as well, so we have an extensive program of opportunities for people who are interested in becoming captains of industry or entrepreneurs or leaders in a very broad range of activities, and we provide lots of opportunities for students to engage in those. We also, very interestingly, have experiential learning opportunities. So I've mentioned the fact that you can get involved in case competitions, but we also have subjects called, management consulting or the global business practicum, where we will, as a subject, we will send a group of students off to go and work in Taiwan for 2 weeks. And you'll work in a company, you'll be chaperoned by an academic here, and you'll be given a real-world topic or problem to solve in a company overseas. And so that opportunity, not just to work with your fellow students, but also to see what the rest of the world is like and see what jobs are like around the world, is really quite fantastic and quite unique, I think, to the University of Melbourne. I think I'm probably running close to the wire in terms of time. So I won't talk much about these case comps because I've already talked a little bit about that, but suffice to say it's not just one case competition. We run several of these things throughout the year. Some of them are just domestic, so you can this BCom case competition is coming up in August of this year. That's just for our domestic students here, but it's also a very, very good way for us to train students up into the way case competitions work so that they can then apply for the following year's international opportunities. So, each year we'll be sending a team, and we try to give as many of these opportunities to as many outstanding students as we can. So it's not the case that it's the same 4 students who go to Oslo and to Montreal and to Miami and all around the world. We actually have separate teams so that we have many people that get to experience all of this, and they can work, feed off each other and develop skills in a collegial and communal fashion. But we have lots of these opportunities throughout the year, Yeah, so I know, for example, that we also send teams to Belgrade and places like that on an annual basis. They really are crucial in the way that you develop these creative thinking skills in order to solve real-world problems. And if you don't know much about case comps, the idea is the following. We get an industry sponsor, it could be Woolworths, for example, to come in and say, here's a problem we're grappling with, and it could be how to launch a brand new product range or a separate line of the business. Or a new marketing strategy around that. The students will be given 36 hours to try and come up with a solution, and they've got to prepare financials, they've got to do marketing, they've got to do everything that you would expect a real-world consultant to do. And then they have to come and present. So they actually present typically to all of the other students, but also to executives from the company who come in and spend their weekends listening to what these students have to say in terms of the strategic recommendations they would make. So there's formal presentations, and it's absolutely incredible to see the way that executives from the companies engage with the ideas that the students come up with, and to see the students go on this journey from where they had very low levels of skills right through where they're coming out and giving these incredibly confident and competent presentations to business executives is just absolutely inspiring. And I believe both of the students you're going to hear from today have had that experience, so they will be able to shed some light on it. So I've talked about all the accreditations. We have everything you're going to need in terms of the different sorts of accreditations, and particularly for accounting there, you'll see lots of accreditations that are available and certified here. And there's a huge array of different career outcomes that you can achieve with this degree. That's one of the reasons why I think it's so fantastic. It gives you that flexibility to go off and work in banking or in government or in social entrepreneurship or in consulting. It's incredibly diverse, and there's just a very small range of the types of career outcomes and employees you can either meet on campus or end up working for in the future. So that's enough from me. Now I'm going to introduce our two student speakers, our fantastic and amazing student speakers. Ava, who's a second year student in the Bachelor of Commerce at the moment, who's doing a double major in management and marketing, and Will, who's a third year major in finance in the BCom. And they're going to talk to you. They're going to do a joint presentation which will hopefully highlight some of the key points that I've made and possibly even develop them even further. So please welcome them up to the stage.
Thanks, Paul. It's so great to see all of you here. I didn't actually come to one of these events when I was in Year 12 or Year 11, but you're definitely taking a step in the right direction in coming to these. So, as Paul said, my name's Will. I'm I'm a third year finance student, majoring in finance, and Ava.
I'm doing either management and marketing or marketing finance, so it's a little bit undecided, but that's one of the good things about the flexibility of Melbourne Uni.
Yep, so we'll be doing a bit of a joint presentation, as Paul said, so hopefully giving you a few insights into what decisions we went through when we were in Year 11 and 12, and hopefully shed some insight into a few pointers for you guys. So firstly, we'll talk about when we were in your position. So I graduated school in 2014. I wasn't too sure what I wanted to do in Year 12 and Year 11. I had my eyes set on commerce, engineering, a few different options. So obviously Melbourne, with the Melbourne model right now, so you do a Bachelor of, for example, Commerce, or Bachelor of Science, Bachelor of Arts, whereas a few other different universities you can do double bachelors. For example, like Monash, you could do a double Bachelor of, say, Commerce and Engineering. So I had this toss-up of what should I do? Should I do a double Bachelor? Should I do Engineering and Commerce at Monash? Should I do it, say, Deakin and RMIT? Or should I do this single Bachelor at Melbourne? And what really broke it down for me is what do I enjoy? So I knew I liked commerce. I'd done a few commerce subjects in Year 12, and I knew that I knew that I liked engineering. I did math methods and specialist maths at school, so I was into those kind of subjects. But I wasn't set on it. I didn't know that I wanted to do it as a pathway. So I decided to do the Bachelor of Commerce, and I used these breadth subjects that Paul was mentioning as the engineering pathway. So the first 2 years of my commerce degree, I did all the commerce core subjects, and then also all my breadth subjects were engineering. But after that, I discovered that, look, it wasn't really for me. I wanted more of a commerce pathway. And that was the flexibility that this Melbourne model offered, that I could then drop it and pick up other breadth subjects, and I didn't have to do engineering. So right now I'm going down the finance pathway at Melbourne. So yeah, now Ava will shed some light on her path.
So unlike Will slightly, I was here in 2014 trying to decide what I was going to do with my life at this Copeland Theatre in probably one of those seats. And I think the thing I was most worried about when I was in Year 12, unfortunately, was the possibility of making the wrong choice. So when I looked at the Melbourne model and I knew that I could do all of these breadths, and I could keep the flexibility to also decide later on what I wanted to specialise in, that made me feel a lot better, and that's what made me decide on this course. So, for example, in my Year 12, I was only doing pretty much art subjects and a maths methods, and Melbourne gave me the opportunity to keep doing French in first year uni and then go on to subjects that I really love. Like this semester, I've done French cinema, which is the best subject in the world. But it gave me the opportunity to try everything while also having a course that was quite relevant and also relevant to employers, I think. Did you have anything else?
I guess one thing about commerce is that we're grateful for is that these majors that you do take, they're so employable. So, for example, when I'm majoring in finance, after I do my 3 years of finance, basically companies look at you and they say, yeah, we can employ you. We know that you've got the right accreditation. So it's grateful that you can get a job after 3 years. It's something very beneficial, I think.
So I think something that you would want to know about is probably what it's like on a more day-to-day basis academically going to Melbourne Uni. I personally am in usually around 4 days a week, and I have about 12 contact hours, and I have for the past 3 semesters that I've been at uni. That being said, there is this massive shift from when you're at school and you're in Year 12 to when you move to this very self-motivated environment of being at uni. And you have to, it's true that you have to become more proactive, but you can also adjust your schedule to work better when you work best. So if you work best at night, then you can move all of your classes around. And Melbourne Uni has so many tutorials and options that you can really make it work best for you rather than at school when it's quite rigid.
Yeah, I remember always at the start of each year at school, you'd think you'd come to school on the first day and you'd open up the student LMS or whatever, and you'd find out your timetable. At uni, it's not like that. So, for example, in a first year economics subject, there might be 15 different tutorials you can go to and 4 different lectures that you can work around your timetable. And I was like Ava, I had 12 contact hours, so I did 4 subjects, and each subject had 3 hours. Usually that's 2 hours of lectures a week and 1 hour of tutorials. So I guess it is flexible in the sense that you can work part-time, and I'm actually working 1 or 2 days a week this year, bit of a part-time job. So you do have days off rather than having to go to school and work, being at school, say, 35 hours a week. Another thing is that uni, it's a lot different to school. So at school, I know my mum in Year 12, she'd be like, Will, have you done your homework? Will, here's your lunch for tomorrow. Will, whatever you want, here you go. I'll put it on a silver platter for you. At uni, it's a lot different. So I'm sure a lot of the parents here are looking forward to not having to make school lunches, not having to tap their son or daughter on the shoulder and saying, have you done your homework? How's the SAC preparation going? Now it's more, you go to uni, You have to be proactive in your learning. With only 12 hours a week, you have to do your own study at home. I know when I was in my first year, I got told for every hour you're at uni a week, you should do 1 to 2 hours at home. So maybe 1 hour preparation before the tutorial lecture and 1 hour after. So that's a good kind of indicator of it's not as easy as it sounds. And I guess moving from school to uni, it's a bit of the unknown. You don't know who's going to be in your lectures. You don't know what it's going to be like. But I think just realising that everyone's in the same position as you, it's the fear of the unknown. It's very common to be scared of it. But basically, you walk into a tutorial and there's 20 people in the tutorial, and everyone looks around not knowing anybody. And you just think, maybe I should introduce myself. And these are some of the friends that now I've taken through my university degree, the people that I met, say, in my first week of uni, that I went up to them and introduced myself, or they came up to me. So you just got to be brave. It's not like school where you're forced into a classroom and you've got lunchtime to socialise. You have to basically do it yourself, be proactive in your uni life. And that segues into the social kind of aspect. So you do have to be more proactive, as I said, and I guess a few of the places where it's good to meet new friends, as I said, tutorials. So they're basically the small classrooms of 20 people where there's one tutor who takes your tutorial, and you basically interact with all the people in that tutorial. So you have to speak to them, and a lot of the time you're together, but you have to make an effort to go and speak to them. So if you want to...
I think one of the other things that was quite good about Melbourne Uni, but I didn't realise it until I actually went here, is the campus is quite well designed. You end up wandering around and you bump into people, you end up going to get coffee and you study together, and you end up spending a lot of time and building some really close friendships with people, which is a somewhat underrated aspect of uni, the fact that you'll just bump into one another, but it is something about Melbourne Uni that is not necessarily the case with a lot of other universities. One major thing that I have also realised after being in uni is the student involvement aspect. I know that Paul spoke a lot about international case competitions, and genuinely it has been the best thing I've ever done in my degree. I did the Australian undergraduate business case competition last year, and then I also went to Florida. And there are so many skills that you learn in terms of presentation, in terms of how to analyse and pull apart a problem and think of a solution that's really creative. And parts of that are so incredibly exciting and rewarding when you do find some solution that thinks a completely different way and that people on the board of that company will get excited by. That was certainly something that was really driving the fact that we worked very hard on that. But most of that for me, and what made it such an incredible experience, was the fact that I learned all of these other skills that you can't quite develop in a class or a tutorial. I think you learn to work pretty much up to your limit at some stage when you have a 30-hour case. Sometimes you have to work for, a large proportion of that time, possibly sacrificing a few other things like good food and nice amounts of sleep. But there's also this thing where you work in a team of 4 and you learn to support each other, and if one of them can't get an aspect of theirs done, you take on that aspect. You learn all these things about finance and different marketing and things that you haven't really learnt in your degree, and you also learn to apply them, which is incredibly different, and be able to defend and have conviction in yourself when someone's standing from the board of some company and they say, no, I don't think that's going to work, and you say, oh no, I think it actually will. You have to have conviction, and you really build a sense of confidence from these things, that you can go through all of these different situations and also do a really good presentation at the end.
Yeah, so as Ava said, I also did a case competition. Ava went to Florida in February and I went to Oslo, so it was like -2 degrees, and we spent all our summer leading up to it preparing for this case competition, but it was a great experience, and something that I'll definitely reflect back on when I start working as one of the best things at uni. But uni is not all about the studies and the academic aspects to it. There's also a big social aspect as well, and some of these social aspects is where you make the best friends and you take the friends forward. So I'll touch on the Commerce Student Society. So in my first year, after year 12, my brother, who was 2 years above me, he is doing arts at Melbourne, and he told me, you really have to get involved with the societies at uni. That's where you make friends. That's where you make these long-lasting friendships, and they are great fun. So before I even started my uni degree, I went on commerce camp. So it's basically a weekend where 50 boys and 50 girls go camping, and it's a lot of fun. And I still am great friends with there's 10 of us who are still very, very close friends. I was studying with them just before this, and you really, everyone's in the same boat. As I was saying, it's a fear of the unknown. You have to go up to each other and introduce each other. But these societies, it's not just the Commerce Society, there's other societies, and they're a great way of involving yourself in the university. So I was lucky enough to get myself on the Commerce Student Society committee, so I help run these events now. I know some of the events we run, so every second week we do a barbecue, for example, so you don't bring your lunch that day, everyone just get a free sausage, there's DJs, we do other things like, I think now we have the biggest university ball in Australia, so it's a great way just to put the books down, and get a drink in your hand if you say so, and it's probably the best way to meet people outside, say, a tutorial, or just bumping into someone in say, the library or something. Societies, and they're basically all student run, so they know what you feel like, they want to help you with your journey, so they're a great opportunity. And we might just finish off with a few tips that we want to impart on you guys going through year 12 and going into university. So I know when I was in year 12, I went to one of these, not this session, but at my school they ran a similar commerce session, and the person speaking there gave me one tip that I wish I used in my first year of university, but it was all about organisation. So a lot of you, I'm sure you have email addresses, I'm sure you don't check it very often, but this tip that has basically helped me throughout my degree is just check your emails once a day. Be organised. If you check your emails once a day, and then you'll get opportunities that you wouldn't have otherwise been able to get. So I guess it's all about organisation from my perspective.
Yeah, and I think on possibly a slightly more even wishy-washy note, university, and especially the Bachelor of Commerce, offers so many opportunities, and I know that before applying to the case competitions, I was absolutely terrified. I did not want to do that type of thing at all, but getting myself out of my tiny comfort zone and pushing myself into these things has been genuinely the best thing that I've done. So it's a scary place to be in, whether you're in year 12 or even younger, trying to figure out what you want to do with your life, but push yourself, and I'm sure that you'll end up doing great things.
Thank you so much, Ava and Will. It's really inspiring to hear their stories and to hear more about their experiences. I just want to qualify one thing that they said, and that was that the best thing that they've ever done is the business case comps and French cinema. I think they meant to say the best thing they've ever done is take Sean Pinder's corporate finance class. So with that, can I please invite Sean to come up and give a sample lecture for us? Thank you.
Forgive me while I just get mic'd up. Excellent. So welcome. My name is Sean Pinder. I'm an Associate Professor with the Department of Finance here at the University of Melbourne. The Department of Finance is one of the smaller departments in the faculty, and indeed one of the smaller departments university-wide. We have about 35 academics who teach finance across the 4 years of the undergraduate degree, including the honours year, plus a range of postgraduate programs ranging from the Master of Management in Finance to the Master of Finance program, all the way through to our PhD, which is a very strong 3 to 4 year program. So what I'll be talking about today is a topic known as initial public offerings, IPOs, and this is a topic that at the University of Melbourne you don't actually come up against until the 3rd year of your degree. And indeed you don't come up to it straight away in the 3rd year of your degree, you get into it about week 3 or 4, but we'll skip ahead a little bit. Okay, we'll do away with a lot of the groundwork, if you like, and I'll see if I can get some central messages across to you. But before that, it's important to understand what we do in finance. See, finance is where, if you like, the rubber hits the road, okay, in terms of decision making, in terms of the link between theory and practice. Okay, so finance brings together the theories developed by the economists, the information provided by the accountants, the tools developed by the statisticians and econometricians, theories developed by the psychological experts, if you like, in terms of behavioural finance. We bring all this information together, these tools together, to make real financial decisions, decisions that impact upon all of us each and every day. So 3 big questions for us in the discipline of finance. Why do people, companies or institutions make the financial decisions that they do? How do they act on these decisions? How do they implement their decisions? And what financial impact do these decisions have on different stakeholders? So in finance, it's traditional to talk about shareholders, if you like, as the traditional stakeholder in a company. But in modern finance, we think much more broadly than that. We think about creditors, we think about employees. Increasingly, with sustainable finance, we think about external stakeholders to the firm. We think about politicians. We think about investors. We think about mutual funds who might not have the mandate to invest in our company if we undertake certain practices. So it's a very broad-ranging decision that we're trying to get a handle on here. To IPOs. Before we can discuss IPOs, we need to think about capital as a source, as an asset, if you like, for the firm. There are 2 general sources of capital, equity capital and debt capital. If you like, we're thinking about how we can fund the acquisition of an asset. We can either use our own funds, that is the funds of the owners of the firm, that's equity capital, or we can go outside and borrow funds, okay, from a bank or from other debt holders. Equity is a permanent contribution of capital. Equity is generally not repaid. Shareholders in the firm, who are equity holders, have voting rights over the firm. Shareholders hold a residual claim over the firm's assets. If the firm goes belly up, the remaining assets are divided up amongst the shareholders after all the creditors, the debt holders, are paid off. It's the most risky form of investment. In contrast, debt, it's a temporary contribution of capital. If you loan money to someone, you're expecting to get that cash back. Debt holders generally have no voting rights, okay, over what the firm does. That's not to say, though, that debt holders, that is creditors, can't have an influence over how the company is run. Typically, before lending money to you, I'll invoke some sort of condition, some restrictive covenant, if you like. Okay? You may or may not do certain things with this money. There are no voting rights. It's the least risky form of investment, which begs the question, why on earth would anyone invest in equity? It's riskier. You've got a residual claim. You don't get anything if the company goes belly up, generally speaking. Why would you invest in shares? Sir? Return. Good. Excellent. Well done. High risk, high return. Right? You've heard that statement? High risk, high return? All right. Rubbish. Rubbish. High risk does not necessarily bring high return. What high risk is linked to, and we'll talk about this in years 1 or 2 of finance, high risk implies high required return from an asset. Okay? So a high benchmark return, if you like. So if an asset is promising 20% per annum, that's a pretty good return, right? 20%. Who's going to invest in that asset? 20% return? What if I tell you that that asset is a corporate bond from Greece? Who's going to invest now? Maybe, maybe not. All right, probably not. Right? Your required return in that instance might be 40% per annum. It's promising 20%, That's what we call a negative MPV investment. Okay? High risk, high required return. Risk does not bring its own reward, though. All right, let's set the scene. Way back in 1995, New York City, Pal Mankoff was a man with a vision. And his vision was to supply fair trade coffee by tricycle directly to the desks of office workers downtown in New York. His idea is a huge hit, but he burns through his own capital very, very quickly. He's also run off his feet. So he brings two more partners on board. He brings Sal and Cal, okay, his brother and sister. They come on board as partners in the business, as minor partners in the business, but he also needs further cash to expand operations. So he approaches his friendly neighbourhood venture capitalist, his VC, firm, who provides him with funding for expansion. And in return for the cheque, they get part ownership of the business. So Pal started as a sole proprietorship, okay, his coffee business solely owned. He converted that to a privately owned business with multiple shareholders. Okay, so still not a stock market listed firm, still a privately owned company. We've got Pal, we've got his brother and his sister, and the VC fund. Pal still owns 51% of the shares in the company. Demand continues to grow. Pal decides that he better invest or he better expand into Chicago, right? That's where the next big thing is. But with his existing resources, he can't do it. If he doesn't get into Chicago soon, he's in trouble, right? Other companies are going to enter into the market and take that opportunity away from him. So what does he do? Well, one opportunity, one alternative available to him is to float the company, is to undertake an initial public offering, an IPO. And through the IPO, he can issue additional shares to raise additional capital to fund the expansion. So the first question, why on earth would you undertake an IPO? So in finance, it's not about theory for theory's sake. Okay, there are 1,000 finance academics in the region, and there are 1,100 theories as to why he might raise that capital. What we're interested in finance, though, in real finance, what we're interested in is what companies tell us. Okay? Why do they go to the market? And so let's do some research. Well, our first set of results, and this comes from an article in the Journal of Applied Corporate Finance. Percentage of CFOs, Chief Financial Officers, who agreed or strongly agreed with each of the following statements with regards to the motivation for listing their firm. And the most popular reason was to create public shares for use in future acquisitions. Pause for a sec. The question we're trying to answer here is why would you go from a privately held firm, a firm like Aldi's, for example, to a publicly listed firm, a firm like Wesfarmers that owns the Coles products? Right? Why would you do that? Why would you go to public ownership? The number one reason, to fund growth. Okay? If I've got my shares listed on a stock exchange, I can use those shares as currency to purchase other companies. All right? So everyone from this side across to this side, these two big rows, you're all shareholders in Pal Corporation. Right? We want to take over this Chicago-based coffee firm, let's call it Chicago Limited. We can offer them cash to these shareholders. It's going to be very expensive, right, if we don't have the cash on hand. Alternatively, we can offer them shares in the combined entity, okay, through what's known as a merger or an acquisition. So by going public, we create a currency that we can use to acquire further assets in a strategic fashion. Does that make sense? All right, so that's the number one reason put forward by CFOs. Secondly, to establish a market price or value for our firm. As a privately held firm, I've got a sense of what the company's worth, but I'm not really sure. This is particularly a problem if my brother and sister want to cash out of the firm. So by becoming publicly listed, I can now work out what the market value of the shares is. To enhance reputation, it's a great marketing opportunity. To broaden the base of ownership. To allow one or more principals to diversify personal holdings. It's a way to cash out, if you like. Venture capitalists like to cash out. They're not in there for the long haul. Okay? How do they act on these decisions? How do they list their shares? All right, let's forget about Pal. Let's forget about that fictitious case. Let's now turn our attention to the e-commerce firm, the Alibaba Group. Okay, Alibaba listed in the US in 2014, raising $25 billion, so issuing shares worth $25 billion to the market, giving it a total market capitalisation of over $230 billion US. Jack Ma, of course, was the founder of Alibaba. So the other $205 billion worth of shares is held by the existing owners in the firm. The $25 billion was additional capital that was being raised. Some of that returned to the initial owners, but mostly the initial owners are simply holding stock. So how did they do this? What was the process followed? The first step is to engage an investment banker. And the investment banker is basically going to guide the deal through the process. You see, Alibaba is an e-commerce firm. They're not bankers themselves. They're only ever going to have to list once, okay, as a parent firm. Right? So they're not experts in this particular area. So they need the experts, so they get the investment banks. So what the investment banks will do is not only guide them through the process, but they'll stand up and say, all right, we'll guarantee the success of the process. And this is the underwriting part of the deal. We'll guarantee that you'll sell all the shares, the $25 billion worth of shares, that you've put out there in the market. Okay? We'll stand by you. So that's a pretty strong statement. Here we have a syndicate of investment banks, Credit Suisse, Deutsche Bank, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley and the Citigroup. This syndicate of 6 banks all standing up, hand on heart, saying, we'll take on that risk, which is fairly brave of them. But of course, there were another 29 sub-underwriters that they then employed to try to lay off that risk. There might be some parents in the room who know a little bit about gambling. Okay? So it's like the bookmaker who takes on a big bet and then tries to offlay or lay off some of that risk by betting with other bookies. That's essentially the sub-underwriting process. The underwriter doesn't do this for free. The underwriter takes a fee, let's say 2% of deal proceeds, they put in their pocket. The sub-underwriters will take a slightly smaller wholesale fee, let's say in the order of 1 to 1.5%. So that's the first step. The second step, the roadshow, marketers. So the bankers market the float, work out what the subscription price should be that they should set for the float that's coming up. So essentially, here's the problem we face. Alibaba, very successful company, right? Very successful. We know we're worth billions. We just don't know how many billions we're worth. Okay? What should our share price be? If we set a price of $50 per share, but the true value is $70, well, then we've shortchanged ourselves by $20 per share. If we set a price of $50 per share, but our true value is $30 per share, no one's going to want our shares. True? So it's a very, very uncertain time. The subscription price, the price at which the new shares are sold into the market. So in early September 2014, Alibaba and its advisors began a 2-week global marketing pitch, stopping in at each of the major financial centres around the world, essentially with a whole lot of nice videos, a whole lot of very sweet marketing pictures designed to woo investors. And the idea essentially is that you had all those bankers getting together with all the institutional shareholders, all the superannuation funds, if you like, all the mutual funds, and asking them, hey, what do you think the company's worth? How many shares are you willing to buy and at what price? And this is a process that's known as book building, trying to build a book of demand for the company's shares, trying to get information about what those shares are worth. And so they filed a statement with the SEC, the US regulators, that declared that the subscription price would be somewhere between $60 and $66 per share. Pause for a sec. You look at that and you think, $60 to $66, that's a 10% error range, right? These guys are being paid literally millions and millions, tens of millions of dollars to advise on this deal. And you can only get within 10%. Okay, that shows how uncertain this process is. Next step. What financial impact did setting the listing price, setting the subscription price have on the financial position of the stakeholders in the deal? On the 18th of September, Alibaba announces a subscription price of $68. So the 10% range wasn't good enough. They actually went beyond that to $68. That's the 18th of September. On the 19th of September, which is an important date, it's the date before, of course. What's on the 20th of September? That's my mum's birthday, never forget. On the 19th of September, shares began trading on NASDAQ and they closed at a price of $93.89. This syndicate of 6 banks, the best and brightest from around the world, advised that the appropriate price for this deal was $68 per share. After a single day of trading, the share price leaped to $93.89. That's $8.3 billion in proceeds left on the table. But maybe there was just a strange first day effect. Maybe there was rampant demand that then dropped away. Well, no, if you track the share price over the 30 days subsequent to listing, you see that it was basically flat. Today at 11 minutes past 4, when I checked Google Finance, the shares were trading at $123.91. So this is what we call underpricing. Setting a subscription price that's low relative to the true market value of the firm, as indicated by the closing share price on the first day of listing. So here the level of underpricing was over 38%. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're sitting there thinking, okay, you cherry-picked a case that we're probably familiar with, but it's a one-off case, Sean. Okay, this doesn't happen all the time. Well, let's look at some of the evidence. This is just looking at the US market, listings in the US. And what we have on the vertical axis here is the mean level of underpricing, the average level of underpricing for all companies that list in a particular month. Okay, and you can see some months here, it's average 75% return. Jan 99, Jan 2000. What's happening here? Anyone? Internet bubble? Okay. Massive, massive average levels of underpricing. The average over the entire sample period from January 1960 to January 2015 was 17%. But maybe that's just a US effect, right? Maybe this is just NASDAQ in the US. How generalisable is it? Okay, so here are results from a meta-analysis, an analysis of a whole lot of different studies put together from countries around the world. And essentially, every country that's been examined in terms of IPO underpricing has shown a positive return. Ranging from in China, the average return is 118%. The average return. If you invest $1 into every IPO in China in this sample period, your average return, not your maximum return, but your average, is 118% on that dollar. That's for a one-day return notionally. Let's come down here to Australia, 22% is the average return. In the United States, it's 17%, as we saw before. I should say, all of this data comes from Jay Ritter from the University of Florida. It's publicly available if you'd like to have a look at it. But sure, most of these IPOs are going to be small companies, right? So they're not going to be all that economically significant. So once again, Jay Ritter's results. What we're tracking here is the amount of money left on the table, that is the aggregate proceeds that we miss out upon because we set the subscription price too low, $153.15 billion over the 35-year sample period that he looks at. That's significant cash. When you think about the amount raised was only $827 billion. We see it in some of the very biggest deals that have gone to the market. So the biggest at the time was Visa. Okay. With the Visa deal back in 2008, they set a subscription price of $44. The first day closing market price was $56.50. They left $12.50 on the table for each share, and unfortunately there were 406 million shares on issue. Okay, left over $5 billion on the table. Interestingly, I've got another arrow here pointing to Goldman Sachs, the investment bank. Even when the banks go to the market, they leave money on the table, right? So it can't just be the ineptitude of bankers. And I should say, some of my very best friends are bankers. Many of my ex-students are bankers, right? So this isn't kick a banker day. Right? So what's going on? What are we seeing here? Right, we're all going to be rich. Very clearly, the reason you turned up tonight was to work out how to make money. And this is how you do it, right? Essentially, every IPO that comes up, you put money into from this day forward, and you'll be rich within a year. Okay? Fantastic. Thank you, Sean. I'll close there. You can go home. Actually, I should say I'm not licensed to give financial advice. Okay? So there must be something wrong with this picture. Let's have a look. Not all IPOs are good investments. Although the average return from investing $1 into every IPO that came up over this sample period generated $1.18.6, in fact, on 28% of occasions, you were losing money on an IPO. Furthermore, there's no rule that guarantees that you're going to have access to every IPO that comes up. Okay? The way that a lot of these deals are brokered is that shares are allocated through brokers, allocated through advisory firms. So you're not going to get access to every IPO. So as an individual investor without good contacts, which describes me perfectly, I'm not going to get access to all the great IPOs potentially. Okay, so that's the first warning. But even having said that, how do we explain this general bias of underpricing in IPOs? There are 7 potential reasons. And this is where we spend a few weeks at third year undergraduate level discussing these reasons and then testing you on your understanding of those reasons. But let me do it within 30 seconds each. The first one, information asymmetry in the winner's curse. The way that we can demonstrate this is let's assume that everybody in this room, except for our front row of people here, is an uninformed investor. Here are my informed investors. Informed investors know when an IPO comes up whether it is under or overpriced. Okay? Informed investors have deep pockets as well. So here's what happens. If an underpriced IPO comes up, if an Alibaba comes up, the informed investors will put up their hand and take as many shares as they can get. The uninformed investors don't know it's a good deal. But every time something comes up, they sort of go, yeah, I'll have some of those, I'll have some of those, I'll have some of those. They're unable to distinguish between the good, the underpriced IPOs, and the poor, the overpriced IPOs. So if a poor IPO comes up, an IPO that's overpriced, the subscription price is $50 when its true value is only $30, so you don't want to get part of that deal. The uninformed investors go, yeah, I'll have some of those. The informed investors stay out of the market. The uninformed investors get all the shares. Okay? The good deals, the informed investors rush in, grab all the shares, the uninformed investors miss out. Now what's going to happen? Okay. Well, as an uninformed investor, it's like that Groucho Marx comment, I never want to be a member of a club that would have me as a member. That's the winner's curse. Okay. I never want to get a full allocation of shares in a float where I can get a full allocation of shares in the float, because it means it's a poor float, it's a poor IPO. So uninformed investors are going to stop playing the game. Okay? And if uninformed investors leave the market, then the IPO market is in trouble, because issuers don't know the true value of their shares. And so what this creates is an impulse to naturally underprice IPOs, to make sure that uninformed investors stay in the market, that they're compensated for this natural bias due to the presence of informed investors. Hold on, Sean, why don't informed investors just keep crowding out the uninformed? Why don't they just buy all the shares? And the answer is that they're capital constrained. Okay? They don't have bottomless pockets. Information asymmetry in the winner's curse. Market feedback hypothesis. Here are my institutions. I need to offer my institutions some level of underpricing in order to get some feedback as to what the shares are truly worth. All right, guys, tell me what the shares are worth. $10 a share. All right. In return for giving me that information, I'll give the shares to you at $9.80. I'll set a subscription price at $9.80 because I can now use that information to price the general float. So it assumes some sort of staged process. Market feedback, you're paying for feedback from the institutional, the informed investors. Market bandwagon hypothesis. The idea here is that you've got a multi-stage process, right? You're selling shares in tranches, different stages. The idea here is that I set off demand or cascade for my shares by underpricing initially. Okay, so you get in at $8. I set a price of $8. Everybody makes money at $8. Okay, hopefully, when I offer my next tranche of shares, you guys will tell your friends and family, hey, invest in this, we've just made money, and I can set the next issue at $9, the next issue at $10. And I've got this very strange reverse-shaped demand curve that I can set up there. Market bandwagon. Investment banker monopsony power. I am your friendly investment banker. Okay? Listen, these shares really are only worth $7. Okay, you should set a price of $7 on these shares. Now, the reason that I'm telling you should set a price of $7 is it makes my job easier. Okay? It's easier to sell at $7, and it's my job to sell the shares. So you agree, because you don't really know what the shares are worth. We list the shares at $7, the share price rockets up to $10. And you go, Sean, what are you doing? It's gone up to $10. We've left $3 per share on the table. My response, hold it a sec. No. The reason it went to $10 is because I did my job so well. I marketed so well. Okay, in fact, you should pay me a bonus. They're only worth $7. Okay. Investment banker monopsony power. Lawsuit avoidance and implicit insurance. Okay, if you're the director of a company, you need to sign off on the prospectus. You need to tell the market what your forecasts are of future revenues, future expenses, what the company's going to be doing into the future. Now, that's a marketing document. You're trying to get people to buy into the firm. So as part of marketing, you might bend the truth a little bit, right? You might be a little bit optimistic in your forecasts. The problem is that you can be sued on the basis of that document, okay, for any misstatement, material misstatement. So one argument for mispricing is that if you misprice the float, underprice the float, and everybody makes money, then they can't sue you for any misstatement in the prospectus. So it's a way of purchasing insurance for directors. But who bears the cost? Not the directors, the existing shareholders of the firm who've left money on the table. Signalling as part of a longer-term strategy. Telstra, who remembers investing in Telstra? Okay, so the first time you invest in Telstra, the first tranche, when it was first privatised, everybody made money. Fantastic. When Telstra went back to the market to raise new capital, it was much easier to raise capital, right? Because it's already a winning story. Of course, Telstra shares have languished ever since. It hasn't been such a good time. But that's a motivation. Signalling as to quality is a clear motivation for initial underpricing. Finally, ownership dispersion. If I set a price of $9.50 a share, I might only get 20 shareholders, right? Very concentrated shareholder base who are actually interested in the company. If I set a price of $8 a share, everybody in the room is now a shareholder. As a manager, this is important because 20 shareholders, it's much easier for them to get together and kick me out of my job and hold me accountable for my performance. It's much easier for 20 than it is for 200. So it's an example of a potential agency problem within the firm. Ownership dispersion. All right. So I've told you how to make money initially, theoretically. What about the long-run performance of IPOs? How do they perform taking out the initial return? Well, evidence on the long-run performance of IPOs historically is quite poor. IPOs are terrible investments if you were to invest at the end of the first day of listing. If you're to invest then and hold it for 3 to 5 years, you're generally making a negative return. Poor long-run investments. How do we explain this? So here, on a market-adjusted basis, negative average return of minus 18%. Underperform the market. 3 explanations of long-run underperformance. Divergence of opinion hypothesis. Who's going to invest into IPOs initially? Those that are optimistic or those that are pessimistic? Optimistic. Those that are pessimistic will stay away from the IPO. But optimism is a natural bias. Over time, optimism fades. And so the negative share price performance over the subsequent 3 years simply reflects the fact that the optimistic investors are reverting to an unbiased outlook for the firm. First hypothesis. Second hypothesis, the impresario hypothesis. Once the deal goes through, the investment bankers are no longer marketing the float. Okay? The investment bankers now withdraw their efforts, and as they withdraw their efforts, as they withdraw their parade, if you like, as they put away the tambourine and the trumpets, everybody wakes up. Okay? It's like the emperor has no clothes type suggestion. Thirdly, windows of opportunity, and perhaps this is the most rational of the three. The argument is that there's a business cycle. Okay? We see that IPOs cluster through time. They don't occur evenly through time. Okay? IPOs tend to occur at particular hot markets. When are you going to list your shares? When your market is going through a downturn, or when your market is experiencing an upturn? At the top of the cycle, right? That's when you're going to list your shares, because that's when the prospects look great. The subsequent down market, following a natural business cycle, the subsequent down market is reflected in the negative share price performance. Okay? And this can help to explain the long-run underperformance of IPOs. The fact that managers are taking advantages of windows of opportunity in order to make the decision to list their firm. All right. So the exam will be next Monday, 9. Closed book. Most exams are closed book at the University of Melbourne. Let me finish with a quick spruik again on finance. Finance is the unifying discipline in the Faculty of Business and Economics. The unifying discipline. We bring together the information from the accountants, the theories of the economists, the tools of the econometricians to make real financial decisions that impact on each and every one of us on a daily basis. I wish you all the best for your future, and I hope to see many of you next year. Cheers.
Thank you so much, Sean. That was very engaging and very interesting, and a wonderful example of how our lecturers try and bring the worlds of theory and practice together and give you ways in which you can achieve your goals. I would like to point out that I think economics is in fact the parent discipline of finance, so you can sort of see the disagreements that we have about discipline areas within the faculty. So I was going to talk a little bit about scholarships before we give you an opportunity to ask questions. So one of the things I mentioned up front was that, you know, we at the University of Melbourne don't make any, we're not ashamed of the fact that we strive for absolute excellence in everything we do. We want to be excellent at absolutely everything we do. And in order to do that, we have to attract the best and brightest students to come and study with the best and brightest academics. However, one thing I'd really like to point out, you know, we have a range of scholarships at the university level that are designed specifically to attract, you know, outstanding students who get 99.5 in their ATAR. And that's just a part of who we are. We will continue to do that in the future and, you know, very much enjoy the opportunities we're able to give those sorts of students. However, it's really important that you walk away tonight with a deep appreciation of the fact that that's not all we're about. You know, we're not so naive to think that the ATAR score is the only indicator of who's capable of coming to the University of Melbourne and doing a Bachelor of Commerce and excelling at that. You know, we like to simplify the world oftentimes by looking at an indicator, a score, a ranking or something like that because it helps us deal with very complex phenomenon. But the reality is there are lots of people out there who have factors impinging on their ability to get an ATAR score above the mandatory threshold that we have here at the University of Melbourne. And it's for that reason that we do offer a very rich and deep set of scholarships that we refer to as access scholarships. So they're for people who do come from regional and rural areas, who do come from financially disadvantaged backgrounds, who do come from underrepresented schools, who do come from a family where they would be the first person in the family to ever go to university. So there's a whole range of things that we think are really important here in terms of providing opportunities for students like that to come here and experience everything that we offer. And they're really, really crucial to who we are and what we want to be and the way we strive to be a part of the community here in Melbourne and more broadly in Australia. And so I'd really encourage you to investigate all of those. now is probably not the right time to ask me specific questions about those range of scholarships, but I will recommend that you speak to people from the Academic Support Office who are down the front here, who do have a lot of information on the scholarships that we offer, and will help you with regard to investigating the eligibility that you might have for any of those scholarships. Okay, so I did also promise that I would get to the end and give you an idea of, what you actually need to get in order to be guaranteed entry into the Bachelor of Commerce. So the first thing to say is that for domestic students, the guaranteed ATAR is 95. There is a minimum there as well, but our experience in the past few years has been that the quota that we have, so we only take a certain number of students in any given year, we tend to fill that with people who get 95 or above. So if you do get under that, doesn't mean you can't come, but it means you won't get a guaranteed slot in all likelihood. For international students, I'm not sure if there are international students in the audience tonight, perhaps not, but their ATAR is slightly lower, but it is changing over time, and we do expect that there will be in the future some convergence with the guarantee for the domestic students. In terms of the prerequisites, it is compulsory that you take some mathematics, and so that you do maths methods when you're in school in particular. And you must get a score of at least 25 in both the VCE English and in maths methods. And that's because we do a lot of technical stuff. And although Sean made it really simple to understand these technical concepts tonight, it is true that you will be required to do calculus in microeconomics and to do a lot of quantitative methods and statistics as part of the degree. So we do require that you have that base understanding in maths methods. And I think that's it from me. I don't think I want to go through that in any more detail. Oh, the only other thing that you might be interested in here is that at the bottom you can see that guaranteed entry if you're an access student. So there is a set of criteria around what qualifies you to be considered as an access student. And it could be whether you have an Indigenous Australian background or have this disadvantaged socioeconomic background that I mentioned before. And so in those circumstances, if you fulfil at least one of those categories, you can get into the Bachelor of Commerce with an ATAR that's much lower, so around it's 88, and we expect that that'll be the case for 2018. Actually, so I should say, in the next week or two, we'll be able to give you the guarantees for that, but in the past it's been 88, and we expect it to be consistent with that in the future. And just to close off, to say that students who come into the Bachelor of Commerce via that pathway actually do outstandingly well. So going back to this issue about how good an indicator is the ATAR score, well, it turns out it's not always a very good predictor of who's going to do well at university. It is a strange transition that you're about to make coming into university, and a weird and wonderful one in many ways. And it's certainly the case that students who get that 88 or above do equally well with students who are getting above 95. So, I think I'm going to, given the time and everything, I think I'm going to finish up now and give you an opportunity to ask me any direct questions you might have. And in the event that it's too detailed or too specific, I'll be able to hand over to one of the people from the Academic Support Office, who will also be mingling down the front here with brochures and a world of information that will be able to help you in making the best decisions as you move forward and transition out of your school life. So thank you for coming, everyone, and best of luck in the future. Questions? There are questions. Okay, so there are some questions. I might ask the academic support guys to stand up as well and come and give me the opportunity to make sure that I can answer it correctly. Yes, you're going to have to use a very loud voice so that we can hear you. The 88 or the 95? Either. So I think the simple answer to that is if it's under the 88, the answer would be...
Depends.
Oh, there you go. I thought it was going to be no.
There is a pathway, it wouldn't be straight away. So you might want to go study at another institution. If you've got excellent results, you can always look at transferring. Yeah, there's a few different things you can do. But certainly if you're below that ATAR initially, you wouldn't be able to gain a place. But there's certainly ways if the desire is there.
Any other big questions? Yes.
Does every applicant get a condition offer?
No.
So if that's no, then what is the condition or the
So
criteria?
I might have a chat to you about that a little bit later because that's probably something specific for you guys because that's a little bit different for international and domestic students. So if you want to come down, I'll have a chat to you about that as well.
Sure.
All right, one question up the back there.
Breadth subjects.
Yes.
So in relation to breadth subjects, for example, design. If someone wants to do commerce that picks subjects from design.
Absolutely. I can't give you the range of specific subjects that are on offer from the faculty in architecture, building and planning, but they do have a range of subjects in that domain, and as long as they're on the list of possible breadth subjects, yes, I would imagine there would be several, at least several subjects that you'd be able to take in that space. Yes?
How many first-year students each year?
First-year students each year in the Bachelor of Commerce. So, yeah, so don't forget when we have our classes, our subjects here, if you come in and take economics as a subject, you could come from science, you could come from arts. So in terms of actual students that are coming in, the biggest you'd ever see as subject in one of our discipline areas would be about 2,000 students. However, we don't have facilities for classrooms of that size, so they're broken up into different streams. This would be the largest lecture theatre that you'd ever be in, and then you have the tutorials and workshops and things like that, which are obviously much smaller in scale. So I know that's a lot to absorb tonight. Yes, one more question there. Lucky last.
Thanks. I was just watching the June preference period. Is that the 13th of December? Because I know the results are out.
At the moment, so then we'll have an information day. Usually results are out a couple of days before that. A lot of those dates are still being finalised. So.
All right, everyone. So there's some other information there about upcoming events. There is a big open day. You're welcome to come. In fact, I'd encourage you all to come to open day in August of this year. And as I said, best of luck.
I don't know.
there's 4 courses in this specialisation. The first 2 are accounting, and the second 2 are finance. The first one's so course 3 is management of corporate ventures. Course 4 is investment analysis. Essentially what that gives you is an overview of everything you do in finance in the first year. And it's free, sort of scroll through, get a sense of what level of maths is required. But it's finished here, whereas at university it gives you a sense of content. I'm scared by anyone that comes to these things that knows before they've done that, before they've covered it. So it's perfectly natural to not know and actually help you not to know. And what you do is you roll into first year, we make you do finance, we make you do accounting, we make you do economics, we make you do economics. You get a sense of those areas, and then you make a decision. And then once you're in, you can go along to a lecture. You don't take roles. That's the way. But if you're thinking, am I suited for commerce as opposed to something else, an arts degree or something, that's a bigger decision. Commerce. That's how the model's set up. So then you would get credit. Some of your commerce subjects would be counted as credit. The subjects that you taught would be part of the core in part of the credit. So you might not get full credit. Yeah, most of our undergraduate students, of course, arrive. But it doesn't really matter because all the 4 units are run twice a week, so it's almost irrelevant. Okay, so the appropriate answer would be yes, I think the students know them by name, but the reality is I think so every academic is expected to offer office hours and students in the whereas with ours, they tend to be our honours students, our 4th year students, or our PhD students, so research students. So none of our undergraduate students are allowed to teach other undergraduate students. They need to at least qualify. And then we have some externals as well, but mostly it's our own research students. So this would not be 18. So every seat would be taken. Seems a lot. And then tutorials would be 18 to 20 students. That's really a chance to be a one-on-one tutor. So 12 hours of content, so 2 hours of lecture, 1 hour of tutoring. And then we say for each one of those hours, I've always said 3 hours you should be spending working on that work, preparing for your lecture, doing the tutorial work, studying. Think of it like a job. Now some of our students can't, but it's a great opportunity for us to. It's only when students finish their degree that they sit back and they're not going to get that chance again to turn up, to learn, to ask questions. This is it. So you really need to take it. was from so my, I like to point at people and ask questions. We have lots of small group exercises, basically working in pairs during the lecture this size. But I'll be honest, in most lectures it's still fairly dull. So they'll take questions. It's the convention here that if anyone's got a question during the lecture, you can raise your hand. So if you've got a question, 20 other people will answer the question. Where do you come from? Oh, that's good. Exchange is huge, especially in Fiji. Our exchange programs, they're off all around. So there's a lot of partnerships we already have in place. Colombia, we've sent students throughout Europe, tends to be places that are nice during our winter. That's what I would tend to do. But yeah, very well established. And likewise, we get a lot of exchange students coming as well, which is good for the past week. Yeah, a range of programs where you will have that one-on-one, the opportunity for that one-on-one interaction. But I think almost equally as importantly, so in my third year corporate finance pass, 4 times during the semester, I had industry speaking up and talk about the partner from JP Morgan, he flies down to Sydney, pays for it himself, just to give a lecture in the morning, then comes back the next day and gives the same lecture. Just talking, he's an ex-alumni, just to tell them how it operates in practice. So yeah, I mean, finances are really applied to something constantly. How is what we're doing, does it reflect what's happening outside? All right, all the best. No worries, I'll see you next year.
Well, yeah.
Outstanding. You're my MVP. Oh yeah. Thank you. I would have forgotten. you. Do you know what? We'll smash you for everything now. Yeah. No, it's fine. I think this is pretty much it.